Commander Park Jin stood before the massive tactical display, his weathered hands gripping the control console as streams of data flowed across the screen. The last defense grid had just powered up, completing a network that had taken 300 years to build. Every satellite, every weapon platform, every shield generator represented humanity's desperate preparation for this day. The command center hummed with quiet activity. Officers moved between stations with practiced efficiency, their faces showing the calm determination of people who had trained their entire lives for a single purpose. These were not the panicked defenders of humanity's first encounter with the Vorthan Empire. These were the children of survivors, raised on stories of defeat and sworn to never repeat their ancestors' mistakes. Lieutenant Kim Hannah looked up from her sensor station, her young face pale but steady. She had been born into this militarized world, where every human child learned to read star charts before they could properly write. Her fingers danced across the controls as she confirmed what everyone in the room had been dreading and anticipating for generations. "Sir, the distortions are getting stronger. Whatever's coming through is massive." Her voice carried the trained composure of a career military officer, but Park could hear the slight tremor that betrayed her true feelings. This was the moment their entire civilization had been building toward. The heavy doors to the command center slid open with a soft hiss, and Admiral Lee Sung entered, with the measured stride of a man who had seen too much war. His face bore the ritual scars that marked him as a veteran of the border wars, the decades-long conflicts that had followed the main Vorthan retreat. Those wars had been fought against alien remnants and collaborators, but they had served as training grounds for humanity's new military doctrine. "They're finally coming back," Lee said, though it was more statement than question. He had been expecting this day for 40 years, ever since he was a young captain hunting Vorthan stragglers in the outer systems. His promotion to admiral had come with a single mandate: prepare humanity for the aliens' inevitable return. Park turned back to his displays, highlighting the sensor readings that showed space itself beginning to buckle and twist at the edge of the Kepler sector. The energy patterns were unmistakable, matching archived records from the first invasion 3 centuries ago. But the scale was terrifying. Where the original Vorthan fleet had been large enough to threaten Earth, this new armada appeared capable of sterilizing entire star systems. 12 confirmed Dreadnought-class vessels so far, Park reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Energy signatures match Vorthan technology, but they've been upgraded. These ships are at least 3 times larger than anything in our historical records. The view screen flickered and then resolved into an image that would haunt human nightmares for generations to come. Space itself seemed to tear apart as massive alien vessels pushed through from fold space, their emergence creating ripples in reality that made the stars shimmer and dance. The ships that emerged bore the crimson and black markings of the Vorthan war machine. But they had evolved during their long exile, where the original invasion force had numbered in the hundreds. This new armada seemed to stretch across light years. Dreadnoughts, the size of small moons, led formations of cruisers and destroyers, each one bristling with weapons that humanity's analysts had only theorized about. The aliens had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, just as humanity had, but they had devoted that time to building tools of conquest, rather than defense. The bridge fell silent as more ships continued to emerge. Officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment found themselves awed by the sheer scale of the threat they faced. This was not a raiding force or a punitive expedition. This was the entire might of an alien empire, returned to finish what they had started 300 years ago. Lieutenant Kim. Hannah's voice cut through the silence as her sensors detected something that made her blood run cold. "Sir, I'm reading troop transports. Hundreds of them. They're not just here to destroy us this time. They're here to harvest whatever's left." Admiral Lee moved to the central command console, his scarred hands moving over controls that would send signals across human space. Every colony, every military installation, every hidden base that had been prepared for this day would receive the same message within minutes. The waiting was over. The reckoning had come. "Signal all colonies and defense stations," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. "Implement Protocol 7. Full military. Alert. All civilian populations to hardened shelters. All reserve fleets to combat readiness." He paused, looking at the massive alien armada that continued to pour through the tiers in space. His next words would be recorded in history, spoken by a man who had devoted his entire life to this moment. After 300 years of preparation, after 300 years of remembering our dead, the Vorthans have returned. They come seeking the same harvest of human suffering they attempted before, but they will find that humanity is no longer the frightened, divided species they once knew. The tactical display updated continuously as more alien ships emerged, but now it also showed humanity's response. Across dozens of star systems, defense grids powered up, fleets moved into position, and millions of humans took their places in a plan that had been refined through centuries of careful preparation. The Second Vorthan War was about to begin. The mining colony of New Busan had been quiet that morning, its workers beginning another day of extracting precious metals from the planet's crust. Children played in the streets while their parents prepared for shifts in the deep mines. It looked like any peaceful human settlement, exactly the kind of soft target the Vorthans remembered from their first invasion 3 centuries ago. The orbital bombardment began without warning. Crimson beams of energy lanced down from space, turning buildings into glass and ash in seconds. The Vorthan cruiser Blood Harvester hung in orbit like a metal vulture, its weapons systematically destroying what appeared to be helpless civilian targets. The alien commander watched the destruction with satisfaction, expecting to find the same terrified humans his ancestors had once hunted. Colonel Cho Min-ho crouched in the command bunker, 50 meters below the planet's surface, listening to the thunder of alien weapons above. The bunker had been carved from solid rock by his grandfather's generation, part of a defensive network that stretched across every human world. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls as his officers coordinated their response. "Phase 1 complete, sir," reported Sergeant Kimbora from her communications station. "All civilians are in the deep shelters. The Vorthans think they're killing helpless people, but they're just destroying empty buildings." Minho nodded, checking his weapon one final time. The rifle in his hands looked simple, but it represented 3 centuries of careful engineering. Every component had been designed with a single purpose: killing Vorthans. The bullets were made from metals that could pierce alien armor. The targeting system could track Vorthan movement patterns. Even the gun's weight and balance had been calculated for human hands fighting alien enemies. "Remember what your families taught you," he spoke into his comm unit as alien dropships began descending through the smoke and ash. "They expect us to run screaming. They expect chaos and panic. Instead, show them what 300 years of preparation looks like." The first Vorthan landing craft touched down in what had been the colony's main square. The massive aliens that emerged stood nearly 3 meters tall, their 4 arms carrying weapons that had once been terrifying to human eyes. Their leader, a veteran warrior named Kethver, expected to see humans fleeing in terror, as their ancestors had done centuries before. Instead, the first thing that greeted the aliens was silence. The second thing was precisely aimed gunfire. From dozens of hidden positions, Minho watched through his scope as the lead Vorthan staggered backward, purple blood spraying from holes in his armor. The alien looked down in shock at wounds that should have been impossible. Vorthan battlesuits had been designed to stop human weapons, but these new rifles punched through them like paper. "Weapons free," Minho ordered. "Execute plan Grandfather's Revenge." All around the landing zone, hidden firing positions revealed themselves. What the aliens had thought were rubble piles and destroyed buildings were actually carefully camouflaged bunkers. Human defenders rose from concealed positions, their movements coordinated with military precision that would have impressed a professional army. But these were not soldiers. These were miners, teachers, shopkeepers, and children old enough to hold a rifle. Every human on New Busan had been trained from birth for this moment. They knew Vorthon weak points better than the aliens knew them themselves. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who had practiced this scenario thousands of times. High above the battle, Captain Song Yuna commanded the orbital defense platform Heaven's Wrath. The station had been disguised as a mining facility. For decades, its true nature hidden even from most of the colonists below. When the Vorthon cruiser moved into bombardment position, Yuna and her crew were ready. "Target acquired," reported Gunner Lee Jaeon, his hands steady on controls he had been training to use since childhood. "Vorthon cruiser, bearing 27 Mark IV. Range optimal for pattern Delta 7. Yuna smiled grimly. Pattern Delta 7 was not just a firing sequence. It was 3 centuries of human engineering and tactical analysis compressed into a single devastating attack. Her grandfather had helped design it. Her father had refined it. She would be the first to use it in actual combat. "All batteries, fire pattern Delta 7, she ordered. The defense platform's main guns spoke in perfect sequence. The first shot struck the Vorthon cruiser's shield generator at exactly the right angle to create a cascade failure. The second shot hit the backup generator before it could activate. The third through eighth shots poured through the gap in the alien defenses, targeting specific weak points in the ship's hull that human engineers had identified through careful study of captured wreckage. The alien cruiser, which had been built to withstand any weapon humanity possessed 3 centuries ago, came apart like a child's toy. Its commander had just enough time to send a single, shocked message to the main Vorthon fleet before his ship exploded in a ball of superheated gas. On the surface, Minho watched burning debris rain down from orbit as his communication array crackled with similar reports from across the sector. The pattern was the same everywhere. Vorthons landing expecting easy victories, only to find humans who fought with the cold precision of people who had been planning this war for their entire lives. "Command, this is New Busan Defense," he reported. 2 fleet headquarters. First wave eliminated. 0 human casualties. The aliens came looking for the same frightened people they remember. Instead, they found us. The Second Vorthon War had begun, and humanity was ready. General Yang Tio walked slowly around the massive holographic display that dominated the war room of humanity's flagship. The remembrance was more than just a battleship. It was a symbol of human determination, built from the wreckage of ships destroyed in the First Vorthon War. Every piece of metal in its hull carried the memory of defeat and the promise of revenge. 3 weeks had passed since the aliens returned, and the war room buzzed with constant activity. Officers moved between workstations, updating battle reports, and coordinating fleet movements across dozens of star systems. The walls displayed maps showing the current front lines, marked with red zones where fighting continued, and green areas where human forces had driven back the invaders. Major Beak Jawan stood before a tactical display that showed enemy movement patterns across the war zone. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she analyzed data from hundreds of battles. The young officer had been born during peacetime, but she had trained her entire life to read alien tactics and predict their next moves. "Sir, the Vorthons are changing their approach," she reported, highlighting several battle zones on the display. "They're no longer using the same tactics that worked for them 300 years ago. They're adapting to our new weapons and strategies, faster than we expected." Yang nodded, his weathered face showing neither surprise nor concern. He had fought in the border wars as a young lieutenant, hunting down the last Vorthon holdouts who had remained hidden after the main retreat. Those conflicts had taught him that the aliens were dangerous precisely because they could learn and adapt. But humanity had learned something too. Let them adapt, Yang said quietly, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had spent decades preparing for this moment. We've had 3 centuries to plan for their education. Every lesson they learn, we taught ourselves first. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the space battle raging around Titan Station. The massive orbital facilities served as humanity's main fuel depot for the outer colonies, making it a critical target for the Vorthan fleet. Captain Nam Heinwu commanded the Human Defense Force. 5 destroyers facing off against 15 alien warships that outweighed them 3-1. The battle looked hopeless from a traditional perspective, but Yang watched with growing satisfaction as the human ships moved with perfect coordination. They had trained together for years, their crews learning to fight as a single organism rather than individual vessels. Every maneuver had been practiced thousands of times in simulation. All ships, execute maneuver Crimson Dawn, Hyenwu's voice crackled over the communication system. Mark, ... execute now. The 5 human destroyers suddenly scattered in different directions, moving so quickly that the Vorthan gunners couldn't track them effectively. The alien admiral commanding the battle group ordered his ships to pursue, confident that he could destroy the smaller human vessels one by one. It was exactly the mistake that human tacticians had been hoping for. Within minutes, the human ships had regrouped behind the Vorthan formation, their positions calculated to create overlapping fields of fire. The weapons they carried looked similar to guns from the First War, but 3 centuries of development had made them far deadlier. Each shot was designed specifically to penetrate Vorthan armor and shields, using weaknesses that human engineers had discovered through careful study of captured alien technology. The lead Vorthan battleship tried to turn to face this new threat, but human weapons were already carving through its hull like a hot knife cutting through butter. Purple atmosphere vented from dozens of holes as the alien crew fought desperately to save their ship. It was too late. The vessel broke apart in a cascade of explosions, taking 300 Vorthan warriors with it. Yang smiled as he watched the alien formation collapse under the coordinated human attack. The Vorthan admiral had studied records of humanity's previous conflicts, but those files described a different species. 300 years ago, humans had been desperate defenders, barely holding together under pressure. This new humanity fought with the patience of farmers and the deadly precision of professional killers. Meanwhile, on Europa, Lieutenant Colonel Park Soo-yang led her marine assault team through the corridors of a captured Vorthan command facility. The aliens had established the base to coordinate their attacks on the inner colonies, but human intelligence had located it within days of its construction. Now, Soo-yang and her team were here to shut it down permanently. The Marines moved through the facility with mechanical efficiency, their powered armor making them look like walking tanks. Vorthan weapons that had once been devastating to human forces now barely scratched the advanced protective suits. Every piece of equipment the Marines carried, from their rifles to their communication systems, represented centuries of focused development aimed at this single goal, killing Vorthan's contact front, reported Sergeant Lee Minyuk as alien defenders appeared around a corner. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. Human weapons punched through Vorthan armor like it was made of paper, while alien return fire bounced harmlessly off marine battlesuits. Soo-yang reached the alien command center and began downloading critical intelligence data, while her team secured the area. The Vorthan computers contained detailed information about enemy fleet movements and planned attacks. Within hours, this intelligence would be transmitted to human forces across the war zone, allowing them to prepare devastating ambushes. Command: "This is Reaper 7, she reported as explosions echoed through the facility. Her demolition team was already placing charges to destroy the base completely. Primary objective complete. Target eliminated. The enemy is finally learning what humans have become, but they're learning far too late to save themselves. The tide of war was turning, and humanity was no longer the frightened prey. The Vorthans remembered. Admiral Kong Minsu stood in the secure communication chamber deep within the flagship Eternal Vigil, holding a datapad that contained codes no human had ever used before. These were not ordinary military orders. These were the activation sequences for humanity's greatest secret, a project that had been hidden for 300 years, even from most of their own people. The Vorthan fleet was regrouping near the edge of human space, preparing for what their commanders believed would be the final push toward Earth. Intelligence reports showed the aliens massing their remaining forces into a single massive armada, confident that humanity had already shown their full strength. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Captain Lim Jie entered the chamber, her face serious as she carried the sealed authorization codes that had been passed down through generations of fleet commanders. These codes had waited in military vaults for 3 centuries, created by the survivors of the First Vorthan War, who had sworn that humanity would never again face such a threat unprepared. "Sir, the Ghost Fleet protocols are ready for activation," she reported, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. "All hidden installations are standing by for the Omega Black authorization." Minsu nodded slowly, thinking of all the generations who had worked in secret to prepare for this moment. Miners who had carved hidden bases from asteroids while pretending to extract, or engineers who had built weapons platforms disguised as research stations. Shipyard workers who had constructed entire fleets in the darkness between stars, far from any inhabited world. "Signal all ghost fleets," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. "Authorization, Omega Black. Show the aliens what human patience looks like." Across human space, signals traveled at light speed to installations that had been waiting in silence since before most current humans were born. Asteroid mining stations that had appeared empty for decades suddenly blazed with power as their true nature was revealed. What the aliens had dismissed as abandoned industrial platforms were actually massive weapons, batteries, their guns hidden behind fake hull plating. In the Kepler system, what appeared to be a dead moon suddenly split open like a flower, revealing the hidden shipyard inside. Hundreds of warships that had been built in absolute secrecy began powering up their engines for the first time. These were not converted civilian vessels or hastily modified cargo ships. These were purpose-built instruments of war, designed from the ground up to kill. Vorthans, the alien fleet commanders, watched their tactical displays in growing horror as human vessels appeared from nowhere. Ships emerged from dark space where no human colonies existed. Bases that had been marked as empty research stations revealed themselves as heavily armed fortresses. Within hours, the Vorthan invasion force found itself surrounded by enemies that should not have existed. Commander Shin Doyong climbed into the cockpit of his starfighter, running his hands over controls he had practiced with in Simulation 4 his entire life. The Vengeance was an experimental craft, built using technology that humanity had been secretly developing for generations. Its weapons could track Vorthan ships with impossible accuracy. Its engines could outmaneuver anything the aliens possessed. "Alpha Squadron, this is Commander Shin." He spoke into his communication system as his fighter launched from the hidden carrier Ghost of Soul. "Remember your training. Every shot has been practiced. Every maneuver has been tested. Make our ancestors proud." The squadron of human fighters dove into the Vorthan battle line like wolves attacking sheep. Shin's targeting system locked onto an alien dreadnought, the computer instantly calculating the perfect attack angle based on 3 centuries of analysis. His missiles streaked through space, each one guided by artificial intelligence that knew Vorthan defensive patterns better than the aliens knew them themselves. "This is for Great-Grandfather Kim," Shin whispered as he watched the alien warship break apart under his attack. Around him, hundreds of other human pilots, carried out their own acts of revenge, each one dedicated to family members who had died in the First War. On the surface of the colony world, New Jeju, Colonel Chen Minna led the liberation of human settlements that had been captured in the early days of the invasion. Her troops moved through the alien-occupied cities with mechanical precision, their actions guided by tactical computers that had been programmed with every detail of Vorthon behavior patterns. The Marines under her command wore armor that made them look like walking machines of death. Their weapons could penetrate any Vorthan defense. Their tactics had been refined through millions of hours of simulation and training. They felt no fear as they advanced through the streets, only the cold satisfaction of a job they had been born to do. Reaper Company advanced by sections, Minna ordered as her forces approached the last Vorthon stronghold in the city. Remember, we are not here to capture prisoners. We are here to end this. The alien defenders had ruled through terror for weeks, expecting the local humans to cower before their superior strength. Instead, they found themselves facing soldiers who moved like machines and fought like demons. Every human attack was perfectly coordinated, every defensive position exactly where it needed to be. "Command, this is Colonel Minna," she reported, as the last Vorthan position fell to her assault. "New Jeju is liberated. The aliens came expecting to find victims, but they found us instead. And we remember everything they did to our people." Humanity had finally revealed its true strength, and the aliens were learning that 3 centuries of preparation had transformed their former victims into something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Fleet Admiral Choi Wanho stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Eternal Flame, watching through the view screen as the final battle of the war prepared to begin. The ship around him hummed with power, its engines and weapons representing the absolute peak of human engineering. Every bolt and wire had been designed with a single purpose: to ensure that no alien species would ever again threaten humanity. Before them hung the remnants of the once mighty Vorthan armada. What had started as thousands of warships had been reduced to fewer than 300 vessels, all clustered around their command ship like frightened children hiding behind their mother. The alien flagship was truly massive, easily 5 times larger than any human vessel, but Wanho felt no fear as he looked at it. The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency around him. These were the best officers humanity had produced, trained from childhood to fight this exact battle. Communications, Officer Parkajin coordinated with fleet elements across the battle zone. Weapons Specialist Lee Daeho ran final checks on guns that had been designed specifically to crack open Vorthan armor. Navigation Officer Kim Soman calculated attack patterns that would give the aliens nowhere to run. "All vessels, this is Admiral." Choi Wanho spoke into the fleet communication system, his voice reaching every human ship in the massive formation. 300 years ago, our ancestors died fighting these same aliens. They died so that we could be here today, at this moment, with the power to end this threat forever. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. Each face showed the same calm determination, the same cold purpose that had driven humanity through 3 centuries of preparation. These people had been born for this battle. Their entire civilization had been built around reaching this moment. Today we finish what our great-grandparents started. Today we make sure that no human child will ever again live in fear of alien invasion. Attack formation, Alpha Zone. Begin the final assault. The human fleet moved forward like a perfectly coordinated machine. Ships that had trained together for decades took their positions with mathematical precision. The Vorthan defenders tried to form a battle line, but their formations were ragged and desperate. Too many of their best commanders had already died in the previous battles. The fighting that followed was less like a battle and more like a carefully planned execution. Human weapons targeted specific weak points on Vorthan hulls. Each shot, designed not just to destroy, but to create maximum psychological impact on the surviving aliens. Alien ships didn't just explode, they burned slowly. giving their crews time to understand what was happening to them. Lieutenant Commander O. Sulji led the final bomber assault on the Vorthon flagship from the cockpit of her strike fighter Justice. Behind her flew 24 of humanity's best pilots, each one flying a craft loaded with weapons designed for this single mission. The alien ship's defensive guns tried to stop them, but the return fire seemed weak and poorly coordinated. Dragon, Squadron, this is Commander O. She spoke to her pilots as they dove toward their target. Remember your training. We're not in a hurry here. We want them to see us coming. We want them to have time to think about what they've done. The human bombers weaved through the alien defensive fire with almost casual ease. The Vorthan gunners were no longer the confident warriors who had terrorized human space weeks earlier. They were broken survivors who had finally begun to understand the true strength of the species. They had chosen to attack. O's targeting system locked onto the alien flagship's main power core, deep within the massive vessel's hull. Her weapons were designed to penetrate the thickest armor and create the most spectacular destruction possible. The aliens would have plenty of time to watch their ship die around them. For everyone they killed 300 years ago, she whispered, as she released her payload. For every human child who grew up afraid of the dark because of you. The Vorthan flagship began to burn from the inside out, as human weapons tore through its hull in precisely calculated patterns. Emergency lights flickered throughout the alien vessel, as its crew realized their situation was hopeless. Some tried to reach escape pods. Others simply waited for the end, with whatever dignity they had left. Admiral Wanho watched the alien command ship slowly break apart, its hull splitting open like a ripe fruit. He opened a communication channel to the few escape pods that had managed to launch, wanting to deliver a message that would follow the survivors wherever they fled. Attention. Surviving Vorthan forces, he said, his voice calm and completely without emotion. You came to our space seeking blood and conquest. Instead, you found fire and judgment. Remember this lesson when you crawl back to whatever hole spawned you. He paused, watching another section of the alien flagship explode in a brilliant cascade of light. Around the battle zone, the last Vorthan ships were surrendering or trying to flee toward the edge of human space. It didn't matter. Captain Kim Taeyong's pursuit squadrons were already moving to intercept them. Humanity forgives nothing. We forget nothing. We will burn anyone who threatens our people. Tell your children and your children's children that humans are no longer prey. We are predators now, and we remember every wound you gave us. The war was ending not with negotiation or mercy, but with fire. The aliens had returned, seeking the blood of a species they remembered as weak and divided. Instead, they had found something far more dangerous. Humans who had learned to hate with patience and kill with precision. The Vorthan Empire was burning, and humanity was finally completely free.